kids, happy Friday. Yes, I look all sweaty because I just finished running and needed to make sure I got this out to you before 8 o'clock this morning. So today you're going to read this story called From the Jumping Tree. It's in the booklet one called Close Reader, and it's the very first story in here. So the first thing I want you to do is kind of just this close reader is for us to practice close reading strategies. So I just want you to go through, just take a second, pause me for a second if you need to, and just get yourself familiar with what you're going to be doing. Look at the blue boxes on here so you can see, like, for example, the online version says to do different things. So you'll be following what's in your textbook or not, this is a workbook. You can write directly on this, okay? You're going to rip out the pages when we come back to school. Don't do that on your own because I'm really good at ripping them out. And usually students are really not good at it and they rip the whole thing. So if we'll do that in class on Monday. But this is called From the Jumping Tree. I just want you to look at like the blue boxes to just get familiar with what these close readers are going to ask you to do. So for example, this one, after you read lines 1 through 30, you're going to go back and circle phrases. You're going to write in the margin. You're going to underline some names. Also in the margin, so if you're on page 3, you'll see that there's a vocab word, a bolded vocab word. It says vendors. You do need to look these vocab words up and have a definition written. That is a point every time I grade these, okay? So if you flip the page, you'll see that like question 2, you'll answer a question. There's another vocab word on page 4. Number 3 is another place where you're underlining and circling and explaining something in the margin. So that's pretty standard, okay? Answering some questions. And it's only a few pages long. Now, number 6 on the back, you will not have to do that because it's a read and discuss. So we'll probably discuss that in class together to refresh the story. And then, let's see, the short response. Okay, so this is usually a longer formatted question. So it's going to be a couple sentences. And I just decided we're going to do that part in class together. So you'll leave the short response blank. Okay, we will come in and do that together on Monday, but you need to have all of the close reading steps done. Okay, so I'm going to read the story to you, and you will have to pause and go through the questions on your own. So let's start at the top with the background. Rene Salada Jr. was inspired to become a writer by his grandfather, who was a first-rate storyteller. Saldana was also motivated by his students when he taught middle school and high school. He told them about the beginnings of his book, The Jumping Tree, and as they wrote alongside him in class, he was inspired to continue his story. So this is a short story, okay? There's lots of different text types. Then we need to kind of start paying attention to that. So this is a narrative style story because it's a short story. And then make sure you pay attention to the narrator's feelings and actions that advance the plot. And what advancing the plot means is like taking those steps up the plot mountain. Okay. Let's see. So, as we read, so we're on number 1 up here, this blue part, okay? And remember, yours is different. So you're going to need a pencil out while you're doing this because you're going to be using it, shockingly enough. So, as we read lines 1 through 30, begin to collect and cite text evidence. You're going to circle the phrase that tells how the narrator feels as the story begins. In the margin, explain why the narrator feels this way, and then underline the names of the other characters introduced in these lines. So if you look, 1 through 30 is through the next page, like through the first paragraph. And number 2 will be on those same lines as well. So we're going to read all of that, and then I'll have you, you'll need to pause me and go ahead and answer those questions. But we always read first. I don't want you to try and answer everything as we go the first time through. We're going to read first, and then you can answer things. I was starting to feel an empty nervousness in my stomach. Not only was I about to start at Nellie Sure Junior College, but I hadn't done much to get the other kids' respect this summer. My cousin George was full 2 years older, was visiting from Meyer across the border. Mayor. This didn't happen too often because we visited my family in Mexico 2 or 3 weekends out of the month, and my Tio George's father, didn't own a car. So George had to wait until my uncle could borrow some transportation. George wouldn't start school for another 2 weeks, so he wanted to take a vacation in the States. Odd how just across the border, only some 45 minutes away, people still walked to work. There was still a milkman, a water truck, brought drinking water to each house, and fruit and vegetable vendors drove or walked up and down streets selling their wares. When I'd visit my cousin, he'd always make certain I had a good time. We'd spend hours on end in his father's carpentry shop, sawing blocks of wood into rough imitations of cars and planes. We'd shave planks of wood until they felt smooth on the palms of our hands or our cheeks. We'd use the shavings later on for kindling or confetti, and we'd dig our fingers into the mountains of sawdust, sometimes as deep as our elbows. So all of that is the exposition of our plot mountain. So he came up to Penidas. I wanted to make sure there was always something to do. Since he was older, I didn't want to do things that were for kids, but I didn't know exactly how to entertain him. At the beginning of the summer, Leonardo had hammered a few slats of wood to my granddad's mesquite tree in the middle of the backyard, called it a tree house, and we were set. It was like the Brady Bunch, which the Brady Bunch was a popular show in the 60s and 70s. Maybe you've heard of it. I think I have it on the stay about it soon enough. Only their treehouse actually resembled a house with its walls, windows, roof, and floor. We had to imagine all that. All we had really were flat pieces to sit on, but it was enough for us. Okay, so that's where we're going to stop. You go ahead and pause me, and you go back to page 3, and you need to do all of the bullet points on number 1. So you need to circle the phrase that tells us how he feels, and that's the very first sentence of the story, okay? And then you need to explain why the narrator feels this way. And then you need to underline the names of other characters introduced in these lines. So go ahead again, pause me. I'm going to keep going because I don't want to sit on here awkwardly. So just pause me and then start again. Okay, so we're going to be able to get through the next page a little bit with number 3. You'll be able to answer number 3 and 4 after this chunk of reading, and then you'll want to fill in the vocab words as well. One day after George arrived, Ricky was over, and we came up with a jumping and gymnastics competition. Actually, Ricky came up with the idea because he was good at that stuff. He was always saying, "Look at this," and he'd tumble, pop a cartwheel, flip backward, or walk on his hands. Once he even walked across the top of a fence like a tightrope walker. Its sharp points didn't seem to bother him. Ricky, that's pretty cool. Sorry, I wasn't following along with this. There we go. Ricky explained the rules as we stood under the mammoth mesquite. Mammoth mesquite, that's a little bit of alliteration. We'll talk more about that in the future. Okay, we're going to climb the tree and start from there. He pointed to the slat where I normally sat. Then jump down to that branch there and grab hold. His finger slid across the sky from the plank to a branch that stretched out below it. Easy enough. Then whoever can do the best trick is the winner and king of the world. What do you mean by trick? Asked George. You know, flips, swinging back and forth, then letting go, seeing who can land the fanciest. All this time I'm thinking, okay, jump, grab, let go, and pray I land standing. No fancy schmancy stuff for me, just do the thing. But George was the oldest of us and the strongest. Ricky was the gymnast, and I was the youngest and the smallest, the one who had something to prove to these guys. I had to go through this deal I had to go through this deal. I had to prove that I could belong to this group, could be a man. Orale pues, said George. Let's climb up. And so we did, hand over hand, foot after foot, until we all reached the top, and we sidled to the edge of the jumping place. When I saw how far the branch was from this spot, then how far the ground was from the branch, I decided to do the minimum, a jump and release. After all, I was only in the summer after my 5th grade year. What could they expect? George went first. Ricky and I stood back watching. My Mexican jumping bean heart was making it hard to concentrate on the task at hand. Even at this age, I knew that people could learn a lot from their body's reaction to a situation. Hand over open fire. Remove hand immediately. Hunger pangs. Eat. Heart gasping at its sides of throat fighting to get out alongside that morning's breakfast. Don't jump. But I am Mexican. I could not strike that. Would not back down. I would do the deed. It was a question of my manhood. Macho o mujeringa. Pues macho. George screamed, "Aye!" and jumped. He swung like a trapeze artist at the circus, Vargas. I whistled, then I was one step closer to having to jump. All right, so hopefully, so right now you're looking at answering or defining the 2 words in the margin of page 5. You need to complete number 3, where you're underlining text that reveals the narrator's thoughts and feelings about jumping. So we know that's going to be the italicized portion. You're going to circle details that describe the setting, circle, okay? And then you're going to explain the narrator's thoughts as he approaches his turn to jump in the margin. So if, for example, like his thoughts about jumping, that's on page 6. If you want to write it on the margin of page 6, that's totally fine. And then you're going to answer number 4. Now, both of the questions at number 2 and number 4, you need to make sure you write incomplete sentences and restate the question in the answer. And then number 4 asks you to support your answer with explicit textual evidence. So that means you need to pull a quote from the portion of the reading and add that into your answer, okay? All right, so now we're gonna finish the story, and then you'll answer number 5, and then that's define the last vocab word, and that's it. All right, so here we go. Ricky stepped up. "We'll see you down there, primo," he said. "Yeah, down there," I forced a smile. He jumped, and it was like he and the branch were one. The rough bark of the mesquite melted into a smooth bar in his hands. He swung forward, let go, twisted, caught the bar again, swung toward me, flipped, all the while holding on to the branch. Released, flipped in the air once, and struck the landing. A perfect 10, even from the Russian judge. That's a nod at some Soviet Union gymnastics that used to dominate. I was next. Orale! Jump! It sounded like an echo. They were so far away. I glanced down at them. A big mistake. My stomach was a better jumper than I because it was already flipping and turning. But I was at the edge of the board. I made a contract with myself for my sake, signed in blood. I began to rock back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, trying for courage. The time had come. It was my destiny to fly, to live on the very edge of life, a life James Bond would be jealous of. So I dug my toes into my tennis shoes, took a deep breath, fought closing my eyes, stretched out my arms, and did it. Let's see. We're already on this part. Whoops. I saw myself from below somehow, my body like Superman's flying over Metropolis. It's a good simile right there, some figurative language. The branch growing bigger, closer, within reach. All I had to do was grab hold now, just like the momentum carrying me toward the branch. The bark, rough on my palms, would be my safe place. All I had to do was close my fingers around the branch, then swing But my chubby little soon-to-be 6th grade fingers failed me. I felt the branch slipping from my fingers, and so, like Superman, confronted my kryptonite, I fell. Confronted by kryptonite, I fell. It's a good little metaphor there, too. As the ground came closer, I tried to remember my PE coach's exact advice on how to fall. He had told his little bunch of munchkins to roll onto our backs or put out our arms and hands. I had only a split second to make up my mind. I stretched out my arms to break my fall, then broke my left wrist. When I rolled over and looked at the sky, I knew I had failed. Or so I thought. When I returned from the doctor that evening, arm encased in a cast, my cousins couldn't stop talking about it. White que padre, they said, caressing my cast. Que padre, oops, sorry. A cast, Ray. You know, said George, that's the best. It's better than a scar. I wish I had one. How does it feel? It was my badge of courage, and it couldn't have come at a better time. I just knew that the guys at school would look at my cast and wonder how I busted my arm. Had I fought a gang? Had I fallen from a motorbike? Or something else just as manly? The girls, too, would be impressed. It was just the break I needed. Ha! Play on words. Gotta love the puns. Okay, so you need to go back and complete number 5, and then that's all you need to do. That's it. Okay, remember the short response, it looks like this. Okay, leave it blank. We'll do that in class on Monday. Okay, kids, have a great 2 days of independent work. Make sure you come to class prepared. Plan on seeing an email from me just about coming back and what that's going to look like and what supplies you might need for next week. It's mostly the normal things like pencil, paper, all that fun stuff. I will talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your day. I can't remember how to stop. There we go.